Okay, those bottom three really are things that come when somebody is quite ill. And that doesn't happen at the beginning of a mental health disorder. That's what's scary about it is that if I flipped back a few slides, when somebody's brain is sick for quite a long time, like it was on that slide, you can begin to actually think that people are plotting to get you. And you can actually have thoughts of wanting to harm other people. And then you mix in possibly someone substance abusing, so adding in drugs and alcohol, then they're really not gonna think right. So that young boy in East Kentwood, and I use him as an example sometimes, and he was a little kid, right? And he murdered this friend of his on the playground. Well, when they questioned him, he had wanted to die. He had wanted to kill himself. So he had thoughts of wanting him to harm himself. And who knows at that time if he thought that other little boy was plotting to get him. So he had to protect himself. But the thing is that we know that with a mental illness, your brain can get quite sick where you are not thinking right. So everything that goes up in the media when they bring attention to mental health disorders, that is when they are in quite far into this illness. It's kind of like if you talk about physical health conditions, right? And someone who has seizures every day, right? Okay, that could be because they're far into their illness of epilepsy and not getting treatment. But we would never focus on that part of that person's illness, okay? Whereas mental health and mental illnesses, we tend to focus on those horrible things that can come later, rather than some amazing stories that are out there of people that are in recovery from mental health disorders. And then again, on that physical side, really super serious, because a lot of times, and especially with kids, that's where the concern from the parents might be. I had to really focus on my kid's physical health, and I'll get them to the doctor for that, when maybe what's going on behind it is a mental health component.
Christy?
Yeah.
Could mental health in teenagers look different than, if you had an adult person
Oh,
that
yeah.
didn't want to change goals, or
Yes.
it was just so somber all the
Yes.
time, would that look different?
Sure it can, because a lot,
Teenagers?
it's so hard, really, with kids, right, to tell what's normal and what's not normal. And that's where, with this mental health first aid class, I'd love for you to be in there, that's where we teach you how to ask more questions behind that, and how you start a conversation up with a teenager. Hi, I've noticed this in you. And we never can be too careful, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's where, like, even just the stuff, an overview, right? And you start to think about kids that become less unkempt and they don't take care of themselves. Hey, are you okay? I've noticed that you're not taking care of yourself lately. You usually always wear your hair back, and the amount of things that you can get out of a person.
Could it also be masked by anger?
Oh, big time. Huge. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, right now we're looking at everything that's come out about the NFL, all these athletes, right, that have gone on to abuse their spouses. Well, I mean, seriously, that didn't start as an adult. That started as kids, and that was the way that they were able to handle their anger. And seriously, they needed counseling. And what maybe was environmental, where they were brought up in an environment like that, as adults, they learned that that's how they're gonna take out their anger on other people. Yeah?
Why does mental health look at in such a negative way?
Because it's scary, and because there is such myths about what it really is, okay? So even when we go into schools, and we teach a mental health curriculum to 9th through 12th graders. And so the first lesson is all stigma reduction. So our first activity, and in mental health first aid, what comes to your mind when I say the word mental illness? Crazy. Psychotic. Hey, you know what? It is. It's hard though, not psycho. So even with kids, we'll say, what do you think the inside of a mental health hospital looks like? And these kids will say, white walls, padded, bars on the windows, these white coats. And we'll be, where did you get that idea? From TV. And so that is so untrue. So the whole first lesson for the kids and for the adults in mental health first aid is spent on, okay, we're gonna step back and we're gonna start looking at the truth. 1 in 4 families are gonna be affected by someone in their family with a mental health disorder. 1 in 5 kids are gonna have a mental health disorder in a given year. 1 in 5 adults. Now, they come in the form of mild, moderate, and severe, okay? So in that mild form, we're talking 1 in 5. Doesn't mean you gotta go to Pine Rest or Forest View, doesn't even mean that you have to go to a psychiatrist. It means that you need to be watching what you're doing for yourself, getting more sleep, eating right? Eat, sleep, and exercise. Because it can go moderate, and then severe, it's 1 in 10. It's serious stuff, but stigma. Okay, so what are some risk factors for developing depression? We know that, big time, number 1, okay? If you have trauma, stressful life events going on, okay, who has stress in their life right now? I mean, seriously, you know? Like, where am I gonna park my car tonight? But, I mean, and then you add in traumatic events, okay? So traumatic events, for all of us, can be measured differently, okay? So, a traumatic event in my life that happened when I was a kid was my dad died when I was 12 years old. Okay, I don't know how I got through that. Now, I know that my mom didn't handle that well because she had a major breakdown when I was a sophomore in high school. So now, you add into my life, I've had a traumatic event in my life. I go down that list. Right now, I've got ongoing stress and anxiety. I've got a senior in high school. I'm just like, if she doesn't decide where she's going to school, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it. Medical conditions that are part of that, I mean, hormonal changes, I've got that. I mean, I'm looking at this thing on my own. Illnesses that are life-threatening, associated with pain. I got major backaches. I don't have a brain injury, but I have a family history of genetics that go along with it. But for boys, and you're gonna take this seriously as much as we all wanna laugh about it in the back of the room, wrestlers are very high incident rate of depression and suicide. And so you can put those together and look at some other risk factors that these boys may have. I know 4 that died by suicide last year who were quite involved in the wrestling world in Kent County. And was that part of that a brain injury? That they sustained a concussion and that the chemicals in their brain became off kilter, and then you add in other components that were going on. Okay, so again, seasonal changes, we know that. And we know that 1 in 10 kids will suffer from a serious, 79 will not get treatment because of stigma. We know that when people talk about suicide, they will possibly do it. Okay, we need to take things seriously, even if we have a kid that's always negative and always pessimistic. We need to take things like that seriously. If somebody said, I just want to die, okay, kids can be extremely impulsive. There's a very high suicide rate amongst men between the ages of 34 and 54 years old. They hold the highest suicide rate in Kent County. And so we need to be watching depression in men. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death amongst high school students in Kent County. It's the 2nd nationally. And college students, it's the 2nd. If a person is determined to kill themselves, we can stop them. And that's why we are teaching mental health first aid. We're giving people the tools and the resources, how to get someone help. Ultimately, someone can get through that pain if they're sitting with somebody, if somebody does not leave them alone. But when somebody is thinking about dying, the psychological pain that goes along with that is, I've never experienced psychological pain like that, but a friend has, and he said, I would have rather had someone chop my arm off than the negative thoughts that are going on in your head and tunnel vision. There's impulsivity factor, and so they did a study amongst people 13 to 34 years old who had attempted, and in the survey, 1 in 4 deliberated for less than 5 minutes. Again, that shows you how impulsive kids can be along with adults. Again, we talk about it, and we know that evidence has shown that just because you talk about it doesn't put the idea in someone's head. If somebody is thinking about dying by suicide, they've already have that idea in their head, so bringing it up actually can be okay. Again, where does bullying tie into this stuff? And I go to the last point, and And that's the inability to change a frustrating circumstance or find a solution to their problem. And so ultimately, when someone does die by suicide, it's depression, but this stressor that they think is so huge that they don't think they ever can change, that can be something that's going on in the back of someone's head. So that's where bullying really gets tied in. Again, what helps kids, how am I doing on my time?
Got 5 minutes.
How much?
5 minutes.
Okay. We want to help kids. How do we help them? And so my 4 major points are through self-esteem building, building assertiveness skills, social skills, cooperation skills. And so it's sad when you really know that high self-esteem really can be a protective factor. But that's not something that you can just instill in someone. Okay? Some kids' makeups are just of that they don't have high self-esteem. So what can you really do to build those 4 things? So I like this. So in your classrooms, you can make sure that kids have at least one friend. Okay? You can, I heard a teacher who actually every Friday she would give kids the choices of who they wanted to sit by. And her idea behind this was that she would see the kids that were not being selected. The kids didn't know who wasn't being selected, but she would make a point. I'm going to take that kid, I'm going to make sure they're going to be put by someone who ultimately meets the ideal be nice person. That person is really, truly nice. I'm not going to put that person by the bullies in the group, try to get them to get along. Okay? So if every kid had a friend, and it could be the teacher. I like the second one, and that's giving kids that every day they have a purpose in your classroom. So making sure that, you know, these little tasks that every day, if my pencils are not sharpened, you know, I'm gonna have a bad day, and it's up to you to help me sharpen these every day, right? When I was going through a really hard time when my dad was dying when I was in 6th grade, I had these teachers, they knew what was going on. They knew what was going on, and they were doing this for me. They had, you know, after school, can you stay after school today and, you know, take care of all the erasers? They used to go through that vacuum cleaner. It was such a cool machine. I don't know if anybody else remembers that. The vacuum thing, right? So cool. But on the other hand, I really took it seriously. And I didn't have all this other stuff going on, but they knew there was a lot going on in my house and that I needed stuff. And then again, the ability for kids to be able to tell a teacher, and a teacher that's going to really legitimately listen to them. And ultimately, what are our protective factors? So family support, being connected, closeness to family. We know that a lot of times our kids do not have that. Close friends and family. Again, that families have rules in their houses. And then at school, ultimately, what can you do? Make sure that every day is a positive day. So having the Be Nice initiative, being part of a close school community, having a safe environment at school, better academic achievement. I mean, I am just seeing so much great stuff happening in Grand Rapids. I mean, it's really awesome. A sense of connectedness to my school, that I'm proud to be a student here at KEC, and a respect for all the cultures of your schools. So a lot of times the stuff that the kid is not getting at home can happen right here. That sense of family. This is my family, KEC. And again, we break out our letters, and N is to notice. And so as a teacher, as a staff person, I can notice what's right in a kid, what's good in a kid, and then ultimately, what is different about this kid and what's going on around here. I can invite kids, I can talk with them, listen to them. I can take some time to spend at recess, maybe, you know, once a month, you know, and I am gonna make it a point that my face is here so they know. Be a good example of leadership. Create healthy anti-bullying habits early, so that's instilling this in your classrooms. Establish rules. Again, the C is challenge, so we challenge other kids. And then E is to empower, and so teaching kids about the NICE, that it's really super important that you notice of how you're treating someone is having an effect on how they're thinking. That's how you tie this stuff in. Invite yourself today to make a change. Granville did it yesterday in their high school, last Friday, acts of random kindness, ARK, is really cool. And they came